The paper on the judge's bench said I was not my daughter's mother, and I had held that child through 9 hours of labor and every single day of the 4 years after. It was one page. A DNA report with a clinic's logo at the top and a percentage near the bottom, and that percentage was supposed to mean that the little girl who called me mom, who narrated her own life out loud like a small tour guide, who had learned to walk holding my 2 fingers, belonged to some other woman. The report said there had been a mistake at a fertility clinic 4 years ago. The report said, in the flat, gray language of a laboratory, that I was a stranger. Across the aisle, my husband sat with his hands folded, calm as a man, waiting for a bus. His sister sat behind him in the front row of the gallery, her back straight, a leather folder resting under one hand, wearing the small, serene smile of a woman who believed the hard part was already over. In the second row, a woman I had met exactly once, in my own kitchen, studied the ceiling. The judge, a silver-haired woman named Pruitt, read the report the way you read a label on a bottle you do not trust. Then a man in a dark suit rose from a side table, a court-appointed geneticist named Dr. Voss, and he carried a sealed envelope across the floor toward the bench. I felt the temperature of the room change. I cannot explain it better than that. Something in the air pulled tight. Before we proceed, Judge Pruitt said, setting the report flat in front of her. She looked over her glasses directly at me. The court has its own result now. Captain Ellison, I'm going to ask you to stand. I stood. I did not shake. I had learned, over 10 years in a job I mostly could not talk about, that the loudest thing a person can do in a tense room is stay perfectly still. Every person who had counted me out was about to learn what a decade in intelligence had taught me. Do not react to the story. Verify it. Find the date that does not fit. Then let the truth do the work you would be tempted to do with your own 2 hands. But let me back up a little. 9 months earlier, I had been sleeping 4 hours a night in a plywood room on the far side of the world, on an assignment I still cannot describe to you in any detail, counting the days on the back of a child's drawing. The drawing was of a purple house with a crooked chimney, and in front of it a stick figure mother drawn twice the size of the door, because to a 4-year-old the people you love are always bigger than buildings. My daughter, Ivy, had mailed it to me inside a card with 3 stickers and a smear of what I chose to believe was jam. I had taped that drawing to the inside of a locker, and every morning before the day swallowed me, I put my thumb over the crooked chimney and told myself, one day closer. I was an Air Force intelligence officer, a captain on the list for major, which is a polite way of saying I had spent my 20s learning to read a situation before it finished happening. Out there, my job was to notice the thing that did not belong, the detail that was 1 degree off, and to say so out loud before it cost anyone anything. I was good at it. It is a strange, quiet kind of good at something, the kind nobody claps for, but I believed in it. I believed that if you were patient and honest and you checked your work twice, the truth would hold. For most of the deployment, the calls home were good. Ivy would hold the tablet too close to her face, so all I could see was one enormous eye and the ceiling fan turning behind her. Trent would appear over her shoulder, tired but smiling, and we would talk about ordinary things. The gutter that needed clearing, the way Ivy had started asking when Mommy was coming back from her big trip, the tooth she had almost lost and then, dramatically, lost. Then in the last month, the calls changed. They got short. Trent stopped appearing in the frame. When I asked to talk to him, Ivy would say he was busy or out or in the shower, and her small face would do a careful thing, the thing children's faces do when they have been told not to say something. I told myself it was the mission tempo, which was real and brutal in those final weeks. I told myself he was stretched thin, running a house and a job and a 4-year-old alone. I told myself a great many things because the alternative was to lie awake in a plywood room with no phone signal and no way on earth to do anything about it. When my boots finally hit home soil, I did not call ahead. I wanted to surprise them. I had rehearsed it 100 times on the flight. Somewhere over an ocean, my forehead against the cold window. I would knock on my own door, and Ivy would come running down the hall, and she would scream the good kind of scream, and I would catch her, and everything that had been paused for 9 months would simply start again. I still believed I was coming home to my daughter. The rideshare turned onto our street a little after 2 in the afternoon. The maples were in full leaf. Someone was mowing a lawn a few houses down, and the smell of cut grass came through the window, and my chest ached with how much I had missed something as small as that. Then I saw the shoes. There was a pair of men's shoes on the front porch that were not Trent's, and a pair of women's sandals beside them, arranged neatly, the way you arrange things in a house you have decided is yours. I stood on my own walkway with my duffel on my shoulder and my heart going strange and fast, and I made myself walk up the steps and knock. Trent opened the door. He did not open it wide. He stood in the gap with one hand on the frame, and when he saw me, his face did something complicated, and then settled into a flat, prepared calm. He was not surprised. That was the first thing I understood, and I understood it the way I understood things at work, instantly and coldly. He had known this moment was coming. He had decided in advance how he would hold his face. "Maya," he said, "you're back." "I'm back," I said. "Where's Ivy?" "With my sister." Behind him, at the end of the hall, a woman came out of my kitchen holding a mug that had my name painted on the side of it, a gift from Ivy 2 birthdays ago. She was about my age, in a soft gray cardigan, and she stopped when she saw me and did not look ashamed, only cautious, the way you look at weather coming in. Trent did not introduce her. He did not have to. He reached to the table by the door and picked up a large envelope and held it out to me across the threshold. Not a hug. An envelope. He handed it to me the way a cashier hands you a receipt. "You weren't here," he said, "and it turns out she was never really yours anyway." I did not take it right away. "Say that again," I said. Not loud. I wanted to hear the exact shape of it. "There's no point dragging this out. It's all in there. There was a mix-up at the clinic years ago. Ivy isn't yours, Maya. Genetically. It's better you hear it clean. I have never in my life left a document unread when someone wanted me to read it, and I have never in my life taken a claim at face value just because it arrived on paper." I took the envelope. Inside was a petition for divorce, a petition for sole custody, and stapled behind them, a single-page laboratory report. My eyes went down the pages the way they go down a briefing, fast, hunting for the parts that matter, and the parts that mattered hit me one after another: a claim that I had abandoned the marriage and the child, a request for sole legal and physical custody, and the report with its logo and its percentage, asserting that I bore no biological relationship to my own daughter. I stepped past him into my own front hall. He let me. In the kitchen, at the counter where I had made 10,000 cups of coffee, stood his sister Bridget. She had a dish towel over her shoulder as if she lived there, and a leather folder squared on the counter in front of her. "Bridget," I said. "Maya," she said pleasantly, "you look tired. The report has your clinic's name on the collection line." Something flickered across her face, there and gone. The clinic did the collection. Yes. These things happen more than people know. Embryos, samples, they get mislabeled. I know it's a shock, but the test is conclusive. She touched the folder. "It's better you hear it clean and don't fight something you can't win." There it was. Not fight something you can't win. People say a great many things in a kitchen, but that one told me everything. She was not comforting me. She was managing me. She was reading from a script, and a script means someone wrote it in advance, and a thing written in advance is a plan. My heart was doing something violent in my chest. I want to be honest with you about that, because I do not want you to think I am made of iron all the way through. In that kitchen, I wanted to scream. I wanted to sweep that folder off the counter and put my hands on the two of them and make the world make sense again by force. My daughter's drawing was still taped inside a locker on another continent, and these people were standing in my house telling me she was not mine. But there was another voice, the one the job had trained into me over 10 years, and it was quieter and it was stronger, and it said, "Breathe and read every word and note the date." So I did. I stood very still in my own kitchen, and I asked if I could photograph the report, and Bridget, confident, waved a hand. Sheer, of course. And I took a picture of every page. And on the chain of custody form clipped behind the result, in a small box that people who write these schemes never think anyone will check, was the date my sample had supposedly been collected. February 9th. On February 9th, I had been 10,000 miles away, in a place I could not name to a soul in that room, on a roster that a duty officer had signed at 0600 with my name on it. I had not been in this county. I had not been in this country. I had been about as far from that clinic as it is possible for a person to be and still be on Earth. I did not say any of that. I put my phone in my pocket. I asked in a level voice where Ivy was staying and when I could see her, and Trent said something about the lawyers handling contact now, and I nodded like a person absorbing a blow, and I walked back out my own front door and down my own steps with my duffel still on my shoulder. I did not scream. I read the date. And in the driveway, standing beside a car that was not mine anymore, I felt the fear turn over inside me and become something with edges. They had planned for a mother who would fall apart. They had not planned for an analyst who would check the date. The next morning, I was at the base legal assistant's office when the doors opened. The attorney there was a calm young captain who listened to the whole thing without once interrupting, which is its own kind of skill. When I finished, he did not reach for the divorce petition. He reached for the chain of custody form. He ran one finger down it and stopped on the small box with the date. "You could not have given this sample," he said. "On the 9th of February, you were on a classified roster I can get certified through your command. You want to understand what you're actually holding." He turned the page toward me. "This is not a DNA problem, Captain. A DNA problem is when the science says something you don't want to hear. This is a forgery problem. Someone put your name on a sample you never gave on a day you were provably somewhere else." I had known it since the kitchen, but hearing another person say it out loud, a person with a law degree and no reason to be kind to me, did something to the floor of my stomach. It steadied it. He sent me to a civilian family law attorney named Karen Okafor because Base Legal could advise me but could not stand up in a county courtroom on my behalf. Okafor's office was small and lined with binders, and she had been doing this for 25 years, and she read the report and the petitions with her reading glasses down on the end of her nose and her mouth getting flatter and flatter. "They built their entire case on one lab report," she said finally. "Custody, property, the abandonment story. All of it rests on that single page because if you're not the biological mother, they think your standing evaporates and the rest falls their way." She took the glasses off. "So here is what we do. We don't argue about the report. We make the court run its own. A retest, court-ordered, court-supervised chain of custody so tight a fly couldn't get into it. And while that's happening, we find out who signed theirs, and where, and when. We make the record of why you were gone the strongest thing in that courtroom, and we make their piece of paper the weakest." "And if the retest comes back and it's real?" I asked. I had to ask. It is the analyst in me. You always ask the question you are most afraid of, because an answer you are afraid of is still information. Okafor looked at me for a long moment. "You carried her. You were at the birth." "I was." "Then it will come back the way the truth comes back." She put her glasses back on. "But we don't ask a courtroom to take that on faith. We prove it." For the first time since the airport, I was not afraid. I was working. I built the file the way I would build a target folder. Dates, sources, nothing I could not prove twice. I requested certified copies of my deployment summary, my leave and earnings statements, my orders in the redacted form the command could release. I made a timeline, 1 line per day for the whole month of February, cross-referenced against every place a record existed that put me overseas. And on an index card, I wrote 2 names and underlined them. The laboratory printed at the top of the report, Meridian Genomics, and the clinic on the collection line, the clinic my sister-in-law managed. I called my squadron commander, a major named Priya Anand, from the borrowed desk in my temporary quarters, and I told her the whole thing in the flat, factual way we are trained to deliver bad news up a chain. She was quiet for a moment when I finished. Then she said, "Captain, you were exactly where the Air Force sent you, and you did the job, and you did it well. I will certify those dates, and I will sign my name under them, and if a judge wants to hear a human being say it out loud, I will put on my service dress, and I will drive to that courthouse myself." I had spent 9 months protecting people I would never meet, in a job most people will never know happened. Now I was going to protect the one person who called me mom. The dig took 3 weeks, and it went the way these things go, 1 card at a time. Meridian Genomics was the first card, and it fell the easiest. A real laboratory carries a real accreditation number, a live one, tied to inspections and a physical building, and people who answer the phone. The number printed on the report belonged to a company that had dissolved in 2019 before Ivy could walk. The address, when you followed it, was a mailbox in a strip mall between a nail salon and a check cashing place. There was no lab. There had never been a lab. There was a logo somebody had made and a percentage somebody had typed. The second card was Bridget, the clinic on the collection line, the one that had supposedly swabbed my cheek in February while I was on another continent, was the clinic she managed. She had the access. She had the letterhead. She had the login that could generate an official-looking form and a chain of custody sheet with the right little boxes. Okafor laid it out for me across her desk, tapping each document as she went. "The person who collected your sample," she said, "works for your husband's sister. The lab that analyzed it doesn't exist. That is not a coincidence, Maya. That is a conspiracy with a letterhead." The third card came in discovery. and it was the one that told me they had never once believed their own story. Trent's phone records produced a text thread with the woman from my kitchen, Danielle. Weeks before I came home, in the middle of the night, he had written to her. Once the custody order clears, it's just us and Ivy. Not once the truth comes out. Not once the test is confirmed. Once the custody order clears, a man does not write it that way if he thinks the child is not his. He writes it that way when he is waiting for a document to finish laundering a lie. There was a bad night in the middle of it, and I will not pretend there was not. Trent filed to move Ivy to a new daycare across the county, which sounds small until you understand what it was. An attempt to fold her into their new life, to make the arrangement look normal and settled before a judge ever ruled. I found out at 9 p.m, and I called Okafor, nearly unable to breathe, and she said 4 words that I have kept ever since. We block it tonight. And she did. An emergency motion and a temporary order by morning, and Ivy stayed where her friends were. Every lie they told needed the next lie to hold it up. I only had to pull one card, and the rest of the tower was already leaning. The court ordered the retest, exactly as Okafor had asked. And this time I stood in the room while it happened. A technician, working under Dr. Voss, the court's appointed geneticist, ran a cotton swab along the inside of my cheek, and then he did the same for Ivy, gently, making it a game, so she laughed, and he sealed each swab into a bag in front of me and initialed the seal and logged the date and the time. This time the cotton went into a bag that was signed, sealed, and witnessed. This time the date on the form was a date I was standing in the room, watching my own breath fog a courthouse window while it snowed the season's first snow outside. There was a status conference before the final hearing, a short procedural thing, and it was the first time I watched their story crack in public. Judge Pruitt, reading through the file, stopped and looked up over her glasses. "Counsel," she said to Trent's attorney in a tone as level as a spirit bubble, "the collection date on the petitioner's original report is February the 9th. I have before me a certification from the United States Air Force placing Captain Ellison overseas on that date. I would like the original chain of custody log for that first test produced. All of it. Every page." She set the file down. "By Friday." Trent's attorney said something about obtaining it from the lab, and the judge said mildly that she looked forward to learning where the lab was, and I watched Bridget, in the second row, stop smiling. It is a specific thing, watching a confident person's face change when they realize the ground they built on is not ground. They had wanted a quiet default, a mother too far away and too heartbroken to fight. Instead, they had a judge who could read a calendar. And then came the hearing, and everything I have told you catches up to the paper on the bench and the geneticist crossing the floor with a sealed envelope. "Captain Ellison, I'm going to ask you to stand," Judge Pruitt had said, and I stood. Dr. Voss broke the seal on the envelope with a small letter opener, unfolded a single page, and read from it in the neutral voice of a man who has delivered 1,000 results and learned to let the number carry its own weight. "The probability of maternity," he said, "is 99.99%. To a scientific certainty, the child is hers." I want to tell you that I felt a wave of triumph. What I actually felt was something quieter and much larger. I said the truest thing I had said inside that building, and I said it softly, mostly to myself. I know. I was there for all of it. The judge took the 2 reports and set them side by side on the bench, the real one and the forged one, and then she did the thing that ended it. She read the dead accreditation number of Meridian Genomics into the record, slowly, digit by digit, and noted for the record that the company bearing it had dissolved in 2019. Then she picked up a printed page from the discovery file, and she read Trent's own words aloud into the quiet courtroom. "Once the custody order clears," she read, "it's just us and Ivy." The room went still. It went still in exactly the way my kitchen had gone still the afternoon I came home, except that this time the silence was not falling on me. It was falling on them. Trent looked at the table in front of him. Danielle had gone white. Bridget's leather folder sat closed and useless under a hand that had stopped moving. Judge Pruitt did not raise her voice. Judges who hold real power rarely need to. The forged report was struck from the record and voided. The parentage claim was dismissed. The abandonment claim was dismissed because it is difficult to argue that a woman abandoned her family while she was under orders on the far side of the planet. And my commander's certification made the dates a wall no argument could climb. The divorce was granted because I did not want to be married to him and had not for some time. Sole legal and physical custody of Ivy was awarded to me, and the forged report, the fictitious laboratory, and the false chain of custody form were referred to the district attorney's office for criminal investigation. Okafor leaned over as the judge gathered her papers, and she said very quietly, so only I could hear, "You held the line." I looked at the empty witness chair and at the two reports still lying side by side, and I thought about the 4-year-old at my sister-in-law's house, who did not yet know that a room full of adults had spent a season arguing about whether she was mine. This was never about winning. It was about my daughter knowing, for the whole rest of her life, exactly who she was. Trent finally looked at me as we all stood to go. I met his eyes, and I did not say anything. I did not need to. The record had already said it all. The coda came months later, on an ordinary autumn afternoon, with a knock at the door of the house I had kept. It was Bridget. She stood on the step with her hands empty, no folder this time, and she looked smaller than she had in my kitchen, the way people do when the thing they were carrying is gone. Ivy was napping. I stepped out and pulled the door, most of the way closed behind me. "I told myself I was helping my brother," Bridget said. She was not making excuses. She was saying it the way you say something you have finally admitted to yourself in the dark. "I told myself the clinic thing was harmless, that the two of you were finished anyway, and it just moved things along. That doesn't make it right. I knew whose daughter she was. I'm sorry, Maya. I am so sorry." I had rehearsed 100 cruel things to say to her. On the plane, in the driveway, in the long nights building the file, I had a whole speech and it was good and every word of it was earned. And standing there on my own porch in the falling light, I found that I did not want any of it. Cruelty would have felt like something for about 4 seconds. And then it would have belonged to me forever, and I had already given these people 9 months. I was not going to give them the rest of my life, too. "Ivy can know her aunt," I said. "Short visits here, with me home, supervised for a while. That's where we begin, and we'll see how you do." I let that sit. "That's not nothing, Bridget. But it's not everything. You don't get to skip the part where you earn it back." She nodded, and her eyes filled, and she said thank you in a voice that cracked, and she went back down the steps. "Grace, but with a fence around it. That is the only kind I have ever found worth giving. The strongest thing I did that year was not the fight. It was choosing not to carry it forever. A year after I came home, I stood in a small ceremony room on base while they pinned the gold oak leaf of a major on the shoulders of a woman 2 people had tried to erase from her own daughter's life. Major Anand did the pinning. She had, in the end, put on her service dress and driven to that courthouse, and stood and said the dates out loud like the wall they were. Ivy sat in the front row in a dress she had chosen herself, which is to say it did not match anything, and when it was done she clapped louder than any grown adult in the room and yelled, "That's my mom!" And there was not a person present who did not smile. That is where I want to leave you, in that room, with that child, with that word. I told you at the beginning that my job taught me to find the detail that is 1 degree off and say so before it costs anyone anything. Here's what the whole thing taught me that the job never could. When someone hands you a piece of paper that says the people you love are not yours, when the story arrives already written and already stapled, you do not have to swallow it and you do not have to set the world on fire either. You can do the harder, quieter thing. You can breathe and check the date and build the file and let the truth come back the way the truth comes back. If this story reached something in you, if you have ever been counted out by people who mistook your patience for weakness, do one small thing for me. Share this video with someone who needs to hear that staying calm is not the same as giving up. Leave a comment and tell me about a time you held the line when breaking would have been so much easier, because I read them, and because someone scrolling past needs to know they are not the only one. And if you want more stories about ordinary courage, about people who lose everything on paper and win it back with the truth, subscribe and stay with us here. Thank you for spending this time with me. It means more than you know that you stayed to the end of it. The end.